by NASA. But this is really cool too, because it's not only using the space station's antennas to test our ability to send timing commands and time-coded messages to basically help the GPS network. But there's also an experiment like this that just recently landed on the moon on Firefly's Blue Ghost mission. So really cool to see different ways that we're using different machines to test lunar technologies right here on Earth and in the sky above us.
And Expedition 73, which will begin in April once, of course, the Soyuz rotation finishes. So it'll be about a month that the Crew 10 is part of Expedition 72 before that Expedition 73 begins. But during that expedition, they will conduct a material ignition and suppression test, or SOFI MIST for short, testing material flammability and in microgravity. And this research could improve fire safety on future missions, contributing to models used to select materials for space facilities and helping to determine the best ways to extinguish fires in space. And so Dragon is now less than 4,000 meters away from the International Space Station, continuing to close in on its target, a little less than 4 kilometers. The next milestone that we are expecting is possibly that AI, or approach initiation mid-course burn. We were expecting that about 25 minutes after the approach initiation burn, and that approach initiation burn took place about 10 minutes ago at 7:35 p.m. Pacific. So we might have that mid-course burn in about 15 minutes. And then after that, a lot of the events will happen pretty soon after that. We'll get all to the waypoints and all through that. And then we'll have docking, hatch opening, and welcome the crew on board. After hatches opens, there will be a brief welcome ceremony to welcome the crew on board. It will actually be joint welcome and farewell ceremony for Crew 9, since Crew 9 will be departing in just a few days from now and bringing an end to their mission and returning back to Earth as well.
And with Crew 10's arrival on the space station, it will bring the total number of people living and working on that orbiting laboratory up to 11. There are 7 crew members currently on board. And as you mentioned earlier, part of those 11 crew members in that joint welcome farewell ceremony will be the Crew 9 cadre of NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, and Sunny Williams, alongside Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. Now, the Crew 9 astronauts will bring, this basically allows them to come home, right? Because we like to do direct handovers between our crews to help get familiarized with the International Space Station right when they get up there. So one of the things that they will be doing is helping the Crew 10 crew get up to speed on those emergency procedures on board the space station. And then when NASA and SpaceX teams determine that weather is ideal for splashdown around Florida, the members of the Crew 9 crew will board their Dragon spacecraft for their return to Earth.
And as you mentioned a little bit, those direct handovers that we're going to see between Crew 9 and Crew 10, so those handovers between crews, allow for a continuity of the activities on the International Space Station and also help to ensure that continuous U.S. presence on the space station. Again, we just mentioned that the International Space Station has been continuously occupied by humans for over 24 years now, approaching that 25-year mark in just a few months. And so in a few weeks, NASA astronaut Johnny Kim, along with his Roscosmos crewmates, will join the on-orbit crew. And then shortly after that, we will see the departure of the Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft that will return NASA astronaut Don Pettit, along with his Roscosmos crewmates, home. And that will mark the commencement or the beginning of Expedition 73. And that expedition will then be led by the new space station commander, which is currently on board the Crew 10 spacecraft, so JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi.
And as Dragon continues to approach the International Space Station, we can see from the tracker there on your screen that they are both flying over the southern portions of Africa right now, about to swing out over the Indian Ocean. Yeah, and yesterday was, as we launched, it's all about speed, right? Dragon and Falcon 9 gaining that velocity to get into orbit with each other. But and there we go. Look at that. That was a view from one of Dragon's cameras looking at the International Space Station. This is inside Dragon now, with Commander Anne McLean on your left and pilot Nicole Ayers on your right. You can see them taking a drink there from some of the water that they've got on board Dragon as they continue to monitor the approach to the International Space Station. Unlike some previous vehicles that we have, Dragon is very autonomous in how it approaches the ISS. So the crew is really monitoring and able to take manual command if they need to, but really just monitoring Dragon's progress as it approaches the ISS here today. And there's that view. Ah, oh, Anna, I love this.
And you can tell that Dragon is looking directly at the International Space Station, its target for today, as it continues to make its approach. So we have those great views there. And now that you have that, well, you did for a second have that map view of where the International Space Station was. So yesterday at the time of launch, which was at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, the International Space Station was flying off the west coast of Australia. So you can see now that they're trying to catch up to each other. They had those approximately 28 hours for Dragon to catch up to the International Space Station so that it can dock today.
And you mentioned that catch up, and right before we started getting those great views, we were talking about how yesterday was all about an insane amount of velocity being added to Dragon by Falcon 9. But today, while those vehicles are still going very, very fast, it's a very, very choreographed ballet almost. The vehicles are going to be moving very slow in relation to one another. And that's just to make sure everything stays right on track and as safe as possible as we come in to dock with the ISS today.
And as we were mentioning earlier, so along with that choreography, so we have all of those checkpoints along the way to docking. So we have those waypoints that Dragon can stop at. The flight controllers here in Hawthorne, as well as the mission control in Houston, can make sure everyone is okay. Dragon systems all look good for docking. Station systems all look good to receive the vehicle. So all of those checkpoints and waypoints along the way are important for both the teams in space as well as the teams on the ground to just make sure everything looks good, and then they can continue to approach on in.
And as we can see, and as we can see here, we've got two of our crew members on screen, and I think that on the left is NASA astronaut Anne McClain, right?
Yeah. So, well, for a second you saw NASA astronaut Anne McClain on the left, so she's the Crew 10 commander. But let's go ahead and take a little bit of a moment to introduce you to the crew. So NASA astronaut Anne McClain is your Crew 10 commander. She was born and raised in Spokane, Washington, and then NASA selected McClain as an astronaut candidate in 2013. Crew 10 is actually her second space flight after launching aboard the Soyuz MS-11 in 2018 and serving as a flight engineer on the International Space Station for Expedition 58 and 59. In total, she previously spent 204 days in space, completing 2 spacewalks that totaled 13 hours and 8 minutes outside of the orbiting laboratory. McClain is a West Point graduate and colonel in the U.S. Army. She's highly decorated and a Master Army aviator. She has more than 2,000 flight hours in 20 different aircraft. And McClain is also an avid rugby player and a former member of the USA Rugby Women's National Team.
And I love, too, that she was actually on the space station when Dragon arrived for its Demo 1 mission. And joining her is pilot Nicole Ayers, a NASA astronaut. This is her first space flight. Nicole is a major in the U.S. Air Force and the first member of NASA's 2021 astronaut class. She is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And Ayers has served as an instructor pilot and mission commander in the T-38. The F-22 Raptor, leading multinational and multi-service missions worldwide. She has more than 1,400 total flight hours, including more than 200 in combat. Nicole also has a twin and was born in San Diego, California.
And then this is the second mission to the International Space Station for JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, astronaut Takuya Onishi. He previously launched aboard the Soyuz MS-01 mission in 2016 and spent 113 days in space as a flight engineer for expeditions 48 and 49. Onishi received a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Aeronautical and Space Engineering from the University of Tokyo and then embarked on a career in aviation. He was selected as an astronaut candidate by JAXA in 2009, and during his stay on the space station, he became the first Japanese astronaut to capture the Cygnus spacecraft in space. And while he's not training, Onishi enjoys flying, playing the saxophone, movies, and hiking.
And last but not least is mission specialist and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. The Crew 10 mission is also Peskov's first trip to the International Space Station. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, he was a co-pilot on the Boeing 747 and 767 aircraft for airlines Nordwind and ICAR. Assigned as a test cosmonaut in 2020, he has additional experience in skydiving and zero-gravity training.
And so between NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, those are the cadre of 4 that make up Crew 10, who's currently approaching the International Space Station, again following that launch yesterday from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 7.